See, one of the great things about video games is how you might have no idea what game you're getting into, but for some reason or another, be it its premise or the promises, it just appeals to you. Sure, you might not always walk away happy with what you got, but sometimes you're rewarded with an amazing hidden gem like Blade of Darkness, a game that's over 10 years old, but is still an awesome third-person action game that I can highly recommend for new and old-school gamers alike. The best way to describe Blade of Darkness in its essence is to see it as a third-person, dark fantasy, hack-and-slash adventure game that almost feels like a homage to early dungeon crawlers from a bygone era. Yes, this is a dungeon crawler, through and through, and they've done a fantastic job at creating a varied and atmospheric levels, using differing weather effects, incorporating environmental hazards like crumbling structures and paths. There are some truly brilliant lighting effects that capture the foreboding and nail-biting scenery. You'll really have no idea what's lurking behind each corner, with differing shadows bouncing off the walls, building a real sense of dread. It might sound like a lot, but most of the dungeons are a very linear experience. No BS riddles or obtuse puzzles to wade through. It mostly breaks down to key or item hunting. Even then, it's pretty straightforward. Keys that are carried by enemies are displayed and are automatically picked up when you down them. Hell, the paths themselves are very directed. You can't miss something unless you really try it hard, or can't be bothered to backtrack slightly. You've got quite the selection of classic and somewhat more unique medieval weaponry on offer, from massive claymores to crushing maces to fast swords to more elegant bows and spears. You will constantly be bumping into new weapons through each level, inside more practical armories to picking them up as a reward when you defeat a boss. You can even pick them up from downed foes that carry them. It can be pretty cool killing a powerful enemy, then using his own weapon against his fellow comrades. Besides weapons, you can find shields that do exactly that, and potions that are usually healing items of differing levels. The other item would be the power potion that you can occasionally find every level or so, that increases your defense and attack briefly. As I said, very linear. In fact, you don't even have an inventory screen. All items can be used or equipped with a few button presses. You're handicapped by the number of certain items you have at one time. That's basically the number of potions you have. I personally found it refreshing not having to fumble through an inventory screen looking for the right tool for the right job. Minor complaint. Some levels they'll give you a massive stockpile of healing items, then the next you'll be stripped bare by the half point of the level. Ah yes, now about those characters. At the beginning of the game, you can choose between 4 typical genre tropes, all of which have their own specified abilities and skills in combat. The knight has the best defense, sporting heavy armor and single-handed swords. The dwarf is the overall toughest and uses heavy weapons like the maces and hammers. The barbarian hacks monsters to pieces with his oversized death-dealing blades. Now the Amazonian is the fastest and wields lighter weapons like spears and bows. To me, she's the weakest one because you can't run past enemies often, so playing as a character who can hit hard is preferable. On that too, the knight is the best overall, and the one I had the most fun playing through. He has some access to the heavy armor, so when things get tough in an already tough game, he's going to be the most reliable. But without a doubt, the biggest advantage Blade of Darkness has over many other third-person games, even to this day, is its astounding, hardcore combat. I can barely think of any other game I've played that had combat this well polished at the time of its release. Possibly the reason it took about 5 years to make. Yeah. At first, you're probably going to be bewildered by it. The hordes of evil can wreck you in only a handful of swipes, and you're severely underpowered when you start, so it's going to be a trial by fire experience. It's fight or flight, and the only way you're going to survive is by fighting. So here's the basics. There's a simple lock-on system, which you can use to switch between targets with the displays of your target's health and what items they're using or carrying. You have your simple block button that uses your defensive equipment, but a powerful enough attack from an enemy can completely break through your meager equipment. This can be very problematic with the Barbarian and Amazonian who use their weapons as a shield and can deteriorate over time, leading them to break in the middle of a fight, leaving you completely unarmed. That's probably the reason I encountered so many of their weapons across the game. Then you've got your very helpful and practical skill, which is being able to dodge enemy attacks. Dodging left or right, or backing off, or quickly moving in, is mandatory in combat, and learning the tactics of your foes is essential to keeping your skin on. There isn't any easy counter prompt like in Assassin's Creed. It's down to skill, timing, practice, and a bit of persistence. You get hit, it's usually your own fault, or a bad decision you made in the fight. But even by the end of the game, you'll still get yourself handed to you by tough as nails enemies. So you have challenge that never disappears. You also have a stamina system. Not having enough stamina leaves you unable to attack, putting you in a dangerous position in a fight. There are skills and combos for specific weapons and characters, but being that they're too slow to pull off and could easily be interrupted, I didn't use them very often, relying on good old hack and slashing. Blade of Darkness is a hard game, and the AI makes this apparent early on. They'll block your attacks, switch between defensive and offensive movements, and rarely stay still. You always have to be on your guard in each and every encounter. But possibly the weakest feature of Blade of Darkness's combat is the lack of really good enemy variation. You start off fighting knights, and that's cool and all, because you can rip them to shreds with your blades. Then you fight goblins, for the next few hours, only occasionally dealing with an orc or two. Then you fight skeletons, for another good few hours. There's way too many of them. They're like any interesting tactics, they hit really hard, and there's no satisfaction when knocking them down. Eventually they do switch it back to goblins, but that's basically the pattern of the entire game. Fight goblins, then skeletons, then goblins. Yeah, you get it. It really could have been better. I said this game was an RPG, but it's a light one at best. You kill enemies to gain EXP to go up levels, increasing your health and stamina. That's kind of it. Though it is helpful that your health entirely replenishes after leveling, making it an interesting choice between drinking a rare health potion or trying to hold out a bit longer to level up. Eventually, they start to introduce bigger, mini-boss type monsters. These are big bastards that take up a lot of hits and deal out heavy blows. They're a nice addition to the enemy roster at first, but they soon spam way too many of them in the levels, and they soon become a cheap and frustrating slugfest, with their wacky hitboxes enabling to hit you even though you're completely out of range. Oh cool, it's a goblin! Man, do they look scary! But thankfully, you can manually save at any time. This makes stuffing up a bad jump or getting destroyed in a fight much more bearable, being that you can quick load right back to where you were. If this game didn't have this, I don't think I would have bothered playing. But still, whenever I got pissed off at the combat, either from dying a lot or getting a bit tired of the game, they would throw me a new weapon to kick ass with, or an intense battle to fight in, or some awesome environmental feature to contend with. The graphics themselves are a bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes you'll get some amazing lighting moments and water effects, then you see some really crappy textures that look dated even when it came out then, that really wouldn't impress Quake, and a model that was more blockier than a Lego figurine. But then you see some really cool physics, like drinking a potion, then seeing the empty bottle tumble to the ground, or whacking a crate and seeing it collapse into little pieces. The audio is pretty much the same, but much less noteworthy. They use a very stock library of sounds and clips and themes you've heard a billion times before, making the tense scene that you're in almost seem a little bit goofy, being that you've heard it like about a dozen times before. Now it's easy to point to the story as being the weakest aspect in the game. It's so paper thin and generic, it might as well blow away at my words. Played any adventure game? That you know Blade of Darkness' story, okay? The characters have little personality besides grunting in combat and from maybe a jump, and that's kind of it. There are 2 endings though, and it really depends on whether you bothered to collect the 6 runes across the game. But even then, you do get given the choice to go back and pick them up. I wouldn't blame you if you reached out for a walkthrough just to hurry up on this part. It may seem a bit odd that I love a game that only has one main feature about it, when I do bash other games for doing this, but that's fine because the combat is good, and when I play it, I get good combat most of the time. And that to me is the difference between a game that has a good idea but not enough of it, and a game that uses its best idea to its advantage. This makes Blade of Darkness a game that's legitimately fun and highly overlooked, that's worthy of any hardcore gamer's library.